Good morning, everyone. I know it's like a somber note to start things on, but I am super excited to be here with you guys today. This week, we are diving into a new series for a new year. It's 2024, and things are kind of fresh and new, and lots of people have New Year's resolutions. Lots of people have new things they want to start this year, and so we are starting things off with a message series that I think is incredibly practical and helpful for many of us. Today we're going to be kind of giving an overview of what we're talking about over the next few weeks and kind of giving some context to what that is. But this week, I in particular was kind of sitting down reading through a couple different articles that came across my Facebook or Instagram or my watch is talking to me, Instagram or wherever it came from this week, or my watch, you never know. As I encountered one of these articles, it was on how many people actually still do New Year's resolutions. Now, personally, I can tell you guys, I did not pick one this year. I have in the past had New Year's resolutions a few times, but I was just talking with Jesse, our worship pastor, the other night, and talking about the fact that when I do a New Year's resolution, like I have to go full into it. It doesn't mean I always let it change my life in any positive fashion past the 365 days in that year. I know a few years ago, I gave up energy drinks and I had exactly 365 days without an energy drink. And on the 365th day or whatever, 66, yeah, you know what I mean. That day, right back to energy drinks. So I'm not saying it's great, not saying it always works for me, but I am saying I take them very seriously because when I'm going into this commitment, I want to be able to make sure it's something that I can actually go through with. And it made me think, I wonder what the average American, how many people do this, and also what is the average American's reason for doing some sort of New Year's resolution. I think it gives us a good picture of what we look at as a culture and think there's some sort of problem with, what we look at as a culture and wish that we could change about ourselves as well as the people around us. And so as I looked it up, I saw that about 50% of Americans say that they have some sort of New Year's resolution in 2024. So about half the people around you, I don't know if Utah might be a little different, but I do know that about half the people in the U.S. say that they do some sort of New Year's resolution. And of that, we see that about 48% of Americans' New Year's resolutions are based on improving physical health. That wasn't too shocking to me. If I was going to have a New Year's resolution, it probably would have something to do with that. This could be losing weight, which tends to be the biggest one, or working out, or stopping smoking, or dropping some other habit that we have. But about 48% of the 50% of everyone who does this, so almost a quarter of Americans say that there's some sort of New Year's resolution that's based on improving physical health. 38% of resolutions are for improved financial situations. 36% were for improved mental health. Something I wanted to note that I found interesting was that this is the first year in the last 32 years that this has been taken where mental health was even mentioned, which I do think is an important thing. I'm glad that's on there. But something that was interesting to me was it's easy, and in the article I read in particular, they connected the dots between mental health and financial stability. Because if you noticed, those numbers I just said don't add up to 100%. They actually add up to more than 100%, which if you didn't know is not how percentages work. But it's because people have multiple in each of these. There's some people who want financial freedom and they also want to lose weight. There's people who want to be able to have financial freedom and also have better mental health. And in the article, it stated that for many people, they tied the two, the financial situation and their mental health together. They decided that if they just had more money, as we've been talking about for weeks now, that they would be happier people. They would have more substantial growth in their mental health because there would be less stress, less things to worry about. What was interesting was that there was no mention in this particular article of the congruency between mental health and the physical body. And it's something that I find interesting because we know study after study after study proves that working out, having better physical health does improve our mental state. It does improve our mental health. And so I want us to think about this because this morning, what we're talking about and what we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks is not just simply a feel-good message about how you should go work out so that you can feel happier. That's not what I'm talking about in any way, shape, or form. But what I need us to understand is that there is an intrinsic link between the body and the mind, the spirit that we have, that God has given us, and the bodies that we are inside of. We're not trapped in a bodily prison. We are actually a whole person who is both spirit and also body. And so as we talk about this, I think the connection between physical and mental health, or more specifically spiritual health, is harder for most of us to grasp, but it doesn't make it any less true. It doesn't make it any less important for us to note. And so this series is going to be all about the connection between our physical body and our spiritual lives. Over the next 4 weeks, we're going to be talking about what happens to our bodies after we die. We're going to be talking about who is the owner of our bodies. We're going to be answering a lot of questions that we'll get into today. But all of this is only important if we believe that there's something important about our bodies. And so our first point this morning is this: everybody has a body. Wow, profound, shocking, right? It's not that crazy. We all get this. We're starting slow this morning. It's the new year. We got to start off somewhere. Everybody has a body. And the thing is, I know it's obvious, but the point that we're making here is that we all have these incredibly complex structures that make up us. That who we are is not just simply this basic understanding of spirit and body, and that we're trapped in this. It's not this broken view of the way that we tend to view our bodies. We are powerful and complex and fine-tuned, fragile machines, and it makes it incredibly confusing for us because either somebody or nobody told you the purpose of your body. Lots of bodies. There we go. That's where we're going. Either somebody or nobody told you the purpose of your body. We're all very familiar with being human, knowing what it means to have a bodily existence. Oversimplified narratives have kind of given us these pictures for what our bodies are for all over the world. You can go just about anywhere and get a boiled down, oversimplified overview of what your body is for. And we're going to go through a few of these this morning. I want us to kind of look at these questions, though. There's 4 series questions we're going to be looking at, and I think these are the 4 main questions that come out of these oversimplified worldviews of how our body relates to the world around us. The first one is this: who does my body belong to, and what is my body for? The second question is, how do I honor Jesus with my body? The third question is, what does it mean to be a sexed, embodied human being? That one's always a hot topic. What does it mean? Fourth question, what happens next to my body? Now, all of these questions are designed to actually help us answer the question that I think many of us have asked at many different points in times in our lives, which is, who am I? What is my purpose? Why am I here? And what is all of this for? Who am I as a person on a Sunday morning in St. George, Utah? What is my purpose? And I think all 4 of these questions start to give us a little bit better tools to think through what we would consider this really fun big phrase that we're going to use a few times over the next few weeks, which is biblical anthropology. It's the study of human beings from a biblical approach. What does it mean to actually understand ourselves as embodied human beings in a biblical worldview? What does this look like? And so I want us to dive into this real quick this morning. This is 1 Corinthians 6:20, and it says this. It kind of starts to answer the questions. And if you've ever heard a pastor start to answer some of these questions, this is likely where it starts and often where it stops. And I want us to go deeper than this morning, but it says this, 1 Corinthians 6:20, you were bought at a price, therefore honor God with your bodies. Now, my goal in this series is that we would all leave this place understanding how valued and loved we are. That no matter how you feel about your body, that you are valued, you are loved, you are fully known and fully seen by God, and you are still valued and you are still loved, because it's hard for us to feel that sometimes. 1 Corinthians 6:20, as I've said, sometimes is used in a way where it's kind of just the shutdown to the conversation. People have big questions about their bodies, about the world, and how we interact with the world around us. And unfortunately, sometimes the answer is just, well, you know what? 1 Corinthians 6:20 says, just honor God with your body, just go do that. But how? What do I do with that? What's the next step? And so I hope that over the next few weeks we can dig a little bit deeper into what it actually looks like for us to put some practicality behind these type of statements. So our series thesis, the reason that we have this series, that we're going to be talking about this whole purpose of what we're talking about, the thesis is this: when you embrace God's truth for your body, you will be at peace with your body. So much chaos in our world is kind of caused by the incongruencies between our bodies and our minds. The chaos that I believe can fully be replaced by peace when we understand the purpose of what our bodies are for, why we have them, and what the purpose of all of this is. You know, about 90% of Americans state that they're unhappy with their bodies. I don't think that's a shocking statistic either. And I'm guarantee that if I was to go around the room and ask the average person how they feel, that on a Sunday morning, people would be like, oh, I'm good, I feel fine. But if we're honest with ourselves, I'm gonna guess that at least 90% of people aren't truly happy with the body that they're in. They don't feel as though there's a congruency between how we're supposed to live and how we're living. And so the norm has become discontentment with our bodily selves. To just become the way that we talk about things. Now, I grew up kind of at the tail end of a generation that loves to make jokes at their own expense. And I do it too, trust me. It's not a good habit, but it's true. The self-deprecation is very real in my joking and in my sense of humor. But it also tends to come from a place of insecurity. It comes from a place where we don't feel comfortable with who we are, and therefore we don't understand what the purpose of this is, and we have to make jokes about it to make ourselves more comfortable. And so the question that I think we have to be able to answer this morning is this: who does my body belong to, and what is my body for? It's one of those 4 questions that we're going to be talking about through this series. But who does my body belong to, and what is it that my body is for? And so there's 4 options that we have found that tend to be the cultural observation around this. The 4 options are this. The first one is, my body belongs to me, and my body is for whatever I want. I've heard this view many times. It tends to be, in a lot of cases, a prevalent view because it sounds kind of nice. It sounds easier. My body is for me. I can do with it whatever I want. Don't tell me how to live my life. Don't tell me what to do with my body. It's mine. That's one view. The second view is, my body belongs to them, and my body is for whatever they want, which we'll get into because it doesn't sound like anything that anyone would actually say, and yet I promise I can kind of show you where culture says this a lot, where many of us have fallen into this trap over and over and over again. The third one is, my body belongs to no one, and it is for nothing. I think the first 2 options, if left to play to their full conclusion, are going to leave you with this. You're going to feel, well, I guess if I'm not fulfilled by my body, they're not fulfilled by my body, then there must be no purpose to what this is. And this is why we live in a culture that's sadly incredibly nihilistic, incredibly focused on this type of way of looking at our bodies. And the last one is, my body belongs to God, and it is for imaging Him, which is a really fancy term that I want us to break down as we go farther into this over the next few weeks, and especially this morning. But what does it mean to image God? What does it mean to belong to God with our bodies? So I want us to explore each of these and kind of get into the pitfalls of the first 3 of them and talk about this a little bit just from a biblical standpoint, from a biblical explanation. So the first one is this: my body belongs to me, and my body is for whatever I want. This is the most common approach in our society, at the very least. This is the my body is a playground view of life. We exist in a body to just find out what the limits are, to find out what we can do to reach the most pleasure possible, to find out what we can do to reach the most excitement. We jump out of planes to just try to feel alive. My body is for me, and only what I want is what matters. And this tends to be a prevalent way of seeing this in our culture. The issue is, I think there's a lot of pitfalls to this approach, but one of the biggest ones is it doesn't lead to peace. It leads to chaos and pain, and for the record, it's anti-science to say that our body belongs to us and we're the only ones who have a right to make any decisions with that type of thing. First, the body has natural limits in the scientific world that we know is placed on it. We actually can't just go do whatever we want, whenever we want, without repercussion. That's not how this works. It's not how our physical bodies were created to work. Our bodies have limits that we absolutely must respect if we want to keep living. Has anybody ever gone on a road trip like over 10 hours? Show of hands, anybody ever gone on a road trip over 10 hours? I figured, we're in St. George, there's a few. I'm not gonna ask you to raise your hand for this next part, but I'm gonna guess if I were to ask you, you had to stop and pee at some point in time. Yeah, exactly. David came up here last week and talked about pooping in a cave, and I came up and talked about pee. I don't know what that says, I'm sorry. But what I can tell you is that in a very real sense, our bodies have limits. I would love, trust me, I would love to just go drive for 20 some hours because I've driven across the country. It's not exactly my favorite thing to do, and I hate stopping. I want to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible, as safely as possible, but still as quickly as possible. I don't want to have to stop. And yet, between here and Vegas, if my kids are in my car, I usually have to stop like 2 or 3 times because someone's got to use the bathroom. There are natural limitations put on our bodies for a reason that make us take pause. And the reality is, the more that we live strictly trying to fulfill the desires of our heart, strictly trying to experience as much pleasure as we possibly can, the only thing that we are going to inevitably end up doing is getting closer to our graves even faster than we naturally would. There is nothing about this that fulfills ourselves and everything about it that leaves us broken. It's this idea that pleasure is going to fulfill us, and yet unfortunately it only leaves us with ruin over and over and over again. This position is inconsistent with itself and frankly non-livable. The Apostle Paul made this observation when he was dealing with the same viewpoint in the first century, because believe it or not, this viewpoint is not new. It's absolutely not some new thing that's only happened over the last 30 or 40 or 10 or 5 years. This is something that has been prevalent since the beginning of human history. Paul writes this, 1 Corinthians 6:12. He says, I have the right to do anything you say, which is exactly this type of mindset. I can do anything I want because it's my body. No one can tell me what to do. But not everything is beneficial, is what Paul says. So let's pause here, let the tension of this kind of awkward moment just remain in that sense and continue on. Because the reality is, as we see this, just because we feel like we have the right to do something doesn't make it right in any sense. That's not how we are asked to live our lives. So the second part of this is my body belongs to them, and my body is for whatever they want. Now, as I said, this one doesn't sound immediately like something that most of us would jump into. It sounds like slavery. It sounds like submitting everything that we have, our will, to someone else. And it doesn't sound like something that most of us would willingly sign up for. To say, my body belongs to whoever this happens to be, and they can do anything they want with it. But this is also something that we've seen in our culture that's grown. There's this idea that, like I said, it might seem ludicrous right on the front of things, but for most of human history, this was the prevalent viewpoint. And today, there is still some sense in which this remains. For most of human history, the husband owned his spouse's body, the government owned his body, and a master or emperor probably owned you in some sense. And if you were the master, you were the emperor, you still had cultural obligations that owned you in your own sense as well. And so the idea that we're owned by someone else hasn't completely gone away, but it's changed over time. If you've ever heard the John Mayer song where he refers to a woman's body as a wonderland, it's this exact same idea as being able to own someone and experience everything there is to experience about that person and let it willingly happen because he owns someone else's body. He owns another part of who that person is. And so when we see this, it might not just mean something sexual, but it absolutely could, and it certainly means that we submit ourselves in its entirety over to someone else. And I would submit to you that many people have done this and continue to do this in our culture today, in the sense that they're trying to find their own freedom and usually end up just completely in slavery itself. The pitfall to this is that it is slavery. It sounds awesome. It sounds awful. Sorry. No one would choose this on purpose, but in order to be validated, many times we still fall into this because we want someone else's validation to make us believe that we are who we hope that we could possibly be. 1 Corinthians 6:12, Paul continues as he finishes the rest of the statement here, continues on with this statement, and he says, I have the right to do anything, you say, as we read, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. You don't want to be mastered by anything, to be directed in everything you do, to be owned by another person, another human being with a body. This is not how we are called to live. And the third of these conundrums that we often try to answer the question of who we are with is that my body belongs to no one and it's for nothing. It's just a flesh machine. It's a cage. It's just this thing that we're stuck inside of. And there was some happy accident that happened thousands and thousands of years ago that resulted in us being here today. And through this course of accidental fate, I now have this body, and it's my job to just do whatever I can to have a good, pleasure-filled life while I'm here. And when it's gone, it's gone. And what does it matter? Because there was really no purpose in the first place. It's as if the body is a random taxi that you were forced into at birth, and now what you see in the mirror is not you at all, because it just is the thing carrying you throughout life. It exists for the sole purpose of experience as much as you possibly can. The pitfall of this particular idea is that it denies reality. It denies physical pleasure and for no reason, and it actually opens up the door to unnecessary pain and chaos. I think that we can prove that this view is inadequate. Go ahead and imagine in your mind that you are starving, that you're just so hungry. And I want us to do this, to just go ahead and close your eyes. If you're willing to go with me for just a second, go ahead and close your eyes and imagine that you are starving. You're so hungry. Now, if I want you to just put out there, just imagine that sitting next to you is a beautiful plate with a filet mignon sitting on it. Now, some of you are vegans or vegetarians, so broccoli, I don't know. There's something sitting next to you. Now, what I'm saying here, not just making fun of that, I'm sorry. What I'm saying here is that as you close your eyes, as you sit in this tension of being hungry and you start to think about the food, it's easy for your mouth to begin to water. It's easy for your body to have a physical reaction to the things that you're going through. You can go ahead and open your eyes now. The thing is that there is a connection that is deeply entranced between our human body, the physical likeness that we have, and our mind. It can create saliva in our mouth, getting us ready to eat imaginary food that's not there because it's not really there in the first place. But there is some link between the physical and the mental side of who we are, and therefore the physical and the spiritual side of who we are as human beings. 1 Corinthians 6:12 through 14. I'll finish reading this entire statement. We'll pick up again where we started. It says, I have the right to do anything you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. You say food for the stomach and the stomach for food, and God will destroy them both. The body, however, is not meant for sexual immorality, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. By his power, God raised the Lord from the dead, and he will raise us also. You see, Paul right here just throws a grenade on the idea that our bodies and our minds and our souls are separate. This duality approach that we are a floating around spirit that happened to end up in this particular body by accident just simply isn't backed by science. It definitely isn't backed by scripture. And it's just the first thing we have to break down to understand what is being said here, which brings us to the fourth option, the option that we talked about at the beginning, which is that my body belongs to God and it is for imaging him. Now, I want to show you this in the Bible, but I also want us to just consider this. The fact that our body is intrinsically designed with limits and everything that goes along with us, the fact that we have a mind and we have a soul, the fact that death seems to be in many senses our greatest enemy, the fact that our bodies desire pleasure, all points to this reality that maybe our bodies don't just belong to us, and they actually have a purpose and they have a design that we should search out and find a way to align with. Over the next few weeks, this is why these conversations are important. It's not because of the politics, it's not because of the feelings that certain things are important and they scare us and they freak us out, but because there is scriptural reason that we need to understand what the purpose of our bodies are. In Genesis 1:26 through 28, it says this, "Then God said, 'Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and the wild animals, over all the creatures that move along the ground.' So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. God blessed them, and he said to them, 'Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground.'" There's so much that I think we could say here, but I want us to get into this. You know, every religion and even most kingdoms throughout history, if you study this, have had an image or an idol, a picture of their king, of their god, a statue, a trophy, an image of some sort. But the God of the Bible was not made into an image to be worshiped. The God of the Bible decided that instead, rather, his creation would reflect him as image bearers who would represent him to the world and build a world that draws people closer to God. So instead of choosing to be confined into an image where we have to go to God to go find him, to go pour ourselves out, to be holy enough to go get close to God, God decides to image himself instead of in a statue, a trophy, a golden calf. He decides to image himself in us as his believers. It's literally what Christian means. It's little Christ. It's images of Christ to the world. And so when we take this into our lives, we see that this is an important place for us to understand how we go about everything that we do. If there's a purpose for our body, it's not something that we should, in 90% of the world, 90% of the people, be upset about. It's not something that we should hate. It's not something that we should loathe. It's something that we should take care of because we are stewards over it. It's something that we should guard and protect because we're stewards over it. But it's something that we should be able to also love and understand that it was created by the God who created the entire world. See, for centuries, thinkers and theologians have discussed what it means to image God. And there's some really kind of deep thoughts that are in here, and I want to just kind of go through this real quick. They're a quick summary of a few different views of what it means to image God, and then I want to wrap up with how this applies to us. For years and years, people have kind of been in this argument over what it means to be image bearers of Christ. There's the substantive view, the relational view, and the functional view. The physical view is one. It doesn't really hold a whole lot of weight. If you know what I'm talking about and you'd love to have a conversation about it, we can get coffee this week, but I'm not getting into all that this morning. But with the rest of these views, the substantive view says that it's our capacity compared to creation that best explains the image of God. The relational view is that it's our capacity for relationship with God and others that best explains the image of God. And the functional view is that it's our ability and commission from God that best describes the image of God. Now, each of these views have some merit, but I would say that each of them also lack some biblical aptitude, some pieces that need to be put together to make them make sense for the rest of us today. To be in the image of God, if we can boil this down to its most basic sense, to be in the image of God means that we are responsible to relationally represent him. To be in the image of God means that we are relationally responsible. We're responsible to relationally represent him to the world that we live in. When we do this, we will have the most peace possible. When we do this, we won't be searching for the next piece of pleasure to carry us for the next few hours to get us to the next place where we feel that we've hit our low and we need another hit of pleasure. We won't be searching for the next thing every single second because we can realize that our body was created with a purpose and that we have figured out at least what today it looks like to walk in that purpose, to understand that purpose. And when we do this, we'll have the most peace possible. Of course, this means that everyone matters as we mirror God in this life. To do this well, we also need bodies. We need to understand that our bodies are an integral part of the biblical narrative. They are a part of what's being talked about here. Back again in 1 Corinthians, Paul explains that living out of step with this position is sin and it will hurt you inevitably. He sees the connection here. He says this, 1 Corinthians 6:15, "Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ himself? Shall I then take the members of Christ and unite them with a prostitute? Never. Do you know that he who unites himself with a prostitute is one with her in body? For it is said, the two will become one flesh, but whoever is united with the Lord is one with him in spirit. So flee from sexual immorality, and all other sins that a person commits are outside of the body. But whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought with a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies." This is the call that we have as Christians. Our bodies are for loving God and loving others. Our bodies are temples. Again, we don't have to go to a physical body where there's requirements to allow us to be able to meet and commune with God. We have a temple here, and it is a beautiful piece of what it means to be a Christian because our bodies are for loving God and loving others. The physical life and spiritual life are unified until death, until they're reunited. The pitfall here, the piece of this that could fall apart really isn't there the way that we see this in Scripture. There really isn't a downfall to this. I've heard people say before, you know what, man, if I get to the end of my life and I don't get to find out, this whole thing wasn't true, there is no God, I get to the end and I don't get to find out, I'm going to be thinking like, man, what could I have done? I've had this thought myself too, for the record, where I've thought like, oh man, I must have missed out on so much because I was a Christian and I followed God with my body. I tried to honor him with everything that I do. And the deeper you think about it, the more you realize there is nothing about that that's true. You know why? Because I've never met someone who strives to fulfill all of their desires with alcohol, drugs, sex, all the things that the world can offer us, affirmation from other people, who is truly and actually happy with that. It doesn't happen. That's not how this works because we weren't created to be fulfilled by those things. We were created to solely be fulfilled by being the embodiment of God's image here on earth. So this doctrine of humanity that we're talking about, it tells us we're not a machine, we're not animals, we're not just sexual beings, we're not just economic beings, we're not ants running around the ant farm trying to figure out what to do with our lives, working really hard just to make some money before we die so that we can pass away and hopefully have something to leave for our kids because it's only physical. That is not the picture that we're given. We are creations of God made for relationship with him, responsible to him, and charged with reflecting him. Psalm 139, 13 through 17 puts it this way. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw me, my unformed body, and all the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me you are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Now, all of this, to kind of boil it down, to package it in a way that I think we can take it forward, it starts the conversation of what the next few weeks are going to look like. But we could wrap it up in this bottom line that says this: be at peace with your body because you are at peace with the God who made it. Be at peace with your body because you are at peace with the God who made it. It is so incredibly easy in our culture, in our world, to be a people who are not at peace with ourselves, to be a people who are not fully sure that God cares about our wants, that God cares about our needs, to be a people who feel as though everything is broken and destitute, and therefore, you know what, it really doesn't matter what I do with this shell of a person that I am. But the reality is that what God is saying here, what the Bible tells us, is that your body has a purpose. And it's a beautiful, incredible purpose to image Christ to the people around you. I know the saying has been said before, but it's gone around for years where someone has said that you might be the only Bible that someone reads. There's some cheesiness to that. There's some pieces that I don't love. But what is true is that when you go to work and you image Christ to the world around you, someone is going to notice that there is something different about you. When we live in a world and we don't just live as broken, depressing people, people are going to notice that there is something different. They're going to know why. Why is it that you care about these things? Why is it that you care about the body that you've been given, about the earth that we have, about the world that surrounds us? Why do we care? Because God cares. He created them and He created you with a purpose to be lived out through your imaging of Him. So I hope as we go throughout this week and throughout the next few weeks of this series where we're talking about body theology and what it means to have a body, what to do with that we keep this in mind, because it is the foundation of why this is important, why it matters what we do with the human parts of who we are. So if you could bow your heads with me and pray, I'd appreciate it. I thank you so much for being here today. God, we love you. We thank you so much for everything that you've given us. God, I thank you so much for allowing us to be here in your place this morning, allowing us to worship you, to sing songs for you and about you. God, I ask that as we go forward into this week, that you would continually remind us of the job that we've been given to be image bearers of you, to go image you to the world that surrounds us, that St. George, Utah would be a place where people realize that there's something different about people who go to church. There's something different about Christians who are trying to image you to the world, because we have a job, we have a responsibility, and we have a beautiful purpose because of what you've given us. God, we love you so much. We thank you for everything that you've blessed us with. We thank you for this service. We pray that you would continue to be honored and glorified by everything that we do, everything we say, and everything we sing this morning. In the name of your Son, Jesus, amen.